I'm sorry, did you say patriarchy or Patreon? Okay, so with this whole intro and me talk about patriarchy versus Patreon and shit like that, it's once again, if y'all check out my other videos, you'll see, the brand of person of Negro that loves to do the think pieces and all of that shit, like it's a very clean cut mainstream approach to blackness, or just a mainstream clean cut approach to life in general, versus cultural, tribal, ancestral, kind of approach, which seems to be aimed towards shaming. You tell the alleged hoteps to not tell people how to be black, but it seems like you're shaming, the whole black people are not a monolith. Uh, but it's like, for y'all to use a word like ashy to describe people who disagree with you is crazy, especially because, in the spirit of black people not being a monolith, we may not all experience blackness the same, but one thing we all do experience as black people is dry skin. It's like, why not call people nappy or whatever for having different views? Is that too on the nose? Speaking of nose, why not, police other natural features of black bodies? It's very interesting that this brand of uh, political Negro is so anti body shaming or whatever. Uh, but then it raises the question: by calling somebody ashy as an insult, what is the overall message? Like, is it about self awareness? Are you saying that one's priorities are fucked up? Like, you know, you sitting up here worrying about this or that when you should be worrying about how dry your skin is or whatever the fuck. And then of course that raises the question, you know, can that be applied to people who are out of shape? Um, or is there like a body shaming line you can't cross? Is it more or natural? Is it more or less natural for blacks to be out of shape or to have dry skin? It's like, you may not be able to control your body type, but you absolutely can control whether or not your body is healthy and in shape. You know, but how dry your skin gets, you absolutely cannot control that. Shout out to my brothers and sisters that live in places like Colorado, where no matter how many times you put that shea butter or whatever the fuck, that's another thing. Isn't y'all insult that this brand of hotepery is also called shea butter Twitter or whatever? Are we ashy or not? Like, get the fuck out of here. But here's the other thing. On a more serious note, as black people, we experience things like eczema, and people like me, I've experienced, and I just kind of really learned. I actually, the first time I had this happen to me was in high school, but it manifested in a different way, and it manifested in a different part of my body. It was on my back, but more recently, the shit was on my chest. And as you can see here, the elephant in the room, I have one right here on my chin. But like earlier, that shit was like all over my body. It's something called stress hives or stress cysts. And yeah, when you get too stressed, people's bodies react to stress in different ways, and skin conditions is one of them. Like, I've, for as long as I've known myself as a human being, had somewhat of an issue of and being in this colonized place, Chicago. It's very cold. I love Chicago, Chi-town to Allah down. But at the end of the day, it's got its drawbacks. The other thing about being ashy is, and words that people use to insult people. One person that gets called ashy a lot, which is confusing to me and other people who have been called ashy. Well, I have never been called ashy per se, but I have been called a hotep, and I hear that hoteps are called ashy, etc. But anyway, point is, people like Tariq Nasheed are called ashy often by people on the left. And my thing is, people who get called hoteps call him moist. And moist and ashy are literal opposites, which brings me to this point of anybody can be called a hotep. If anybody can be called ashy, anybody can be called a hotep. And it seems like, you know, this whole shit is vague. So anybody who cares more about being black, anybody who cares about being black more than they should, can be called a hotep. And doesn't that kind of seem problematic and like a slippery ass slope? That brings me also to the features of other quote unquote hoteps that people like me don't share. Like I never really found myself fully embraced by the alleged hotep environment because a lot of them motherfuckers' views are stupid as shit. And simply by disagreeing with the left, I get grouped with them motherfuckers, and that shit blows the fuck out of me. Let's start with, for example, conspiracy theories. That's one of the main reasons I don't think I'm a hotep. Because you're not finna hear me saying Gucci Mane is a clone. You're not finna hear me saying Michelle Obama is a man, knowing good and goddamn well she was born here. She's from O Block. She went to fucking Whitney Young or whatever one of them schools. Like we know that she's a woman. But I'm digressing. Also, spirituality. You would never hear me saying no bullshit about Israel, aside from Free Palestine. But you're not gonna hear me quoting the Bible or none of that shit, and no zodiacs and chakras and none of that dumb shit. I'm not gonna ask you shit about your birthday or none of that. So when it comes to like motherfuckers like grouping motherfuckers together, it's crazy because a lot of the left believes in that shit, and y'all be the motherfuckers that, you feel me, could very well fairly be called hoteps. Also, just general leftist mysticism. I remember when I first moved to Minnesota, I never heard of the concept of being non-binary or being a they, them, or a Z-Zir or any of that. But I met a lot of people who was like that in Minneapolis or in the general, mainly Minneapolis, but in the general Twin Cities area. And the thing about it is Minneapolis and Minnesota in general and that part of the country has a lot of Native American culture that is, you know, highly celebrated and honored. And one thing that they tried to say is that like people in the Native American culture who display what could be considered androgynous characteristics, they're considered two-spirit, meaning they have two spirits, and they and they have special powers, and they can do shit like control the weather and shit. So that's an outline. I don't, for risk of sounding ignorant towards another culture or not woke or whatever, it's still an outlandish, you feel me, belief that anybody can control the fucking weather. So my whole point is, where is the line drawn at who's a hotep? Where's the line drawn at what beliefs are? Because anybody can make you seem crazy. Yeah, my brother, you don't understand. Cause gender is a social construct. That's the real conspiracy, like I could point to my temples and wear a kufi and all of that shit and say any beliefs, insert any belief system and make somebody seem crazy or outlandish. So it's bullshit. My last words I want to say is also that it seems a lot low-key of classism, because a lot of jobs and lifestyles kind of like lead you to have dry skin against your will. Like not all of us have the privilege of making a living by sitting in front of a computer all damn day. You hear me? If you work manual labor, if you wash dishes, you feel me? I remember being a kid having to wash dishes all the time. That shit used to be fucking my skin up. If you know what I'm saying, you work in the medical field where you're constantly washing your hands. You know, if you're a fucking podcaster, you can just sit fucking lotion on your desk. Everybody don't have that. So that's one thing. Also, speaking of class and class warfare, I have been consistently learning more and more about anti-capitalism. That's what the fuck we need to focus on. Everybody who is not in agreement with all of your talking points is not against you. Everybody who don't agree with you is not against you. Everybody who don't agree with you ain't a fucking hotep. You feel me? And here's my theory. I feel as though once capitalism gets diminished, how much you want to bet all the motherfucking crazy outlandish beliefs, hotepery, whatever you claim that to be included, would all go away for various reasons, because the playing field will be balanced. People will be far more, comfortable with life. They're not going to be bickering over bullshit and identity politics as much as we are now. And then the last thing I'm going to say, is while the feminists, leftists, and feminist leftist adjacents are calling people hoteps, the conservatives are calling y'all woke. And it's like, just like the word hotep, woke used to be a word that a certain group identified with, and then it became flipped against them whenever somebody who felt like, you feel me, disproving some sort of claim or making you feel like less of a person, they'll just say, yeah, you're insert random word that's lost its meaning by this point here. And what's crazy also is that by this point, hotep has to be like a slur at this point. I remember the first time I heard a white person say hotep and black people responded positively. They co-signed that shit. And I was just like, wait a minute. So somebody like Lefty Sympathizer can say that coon is not a slur, right? Come on, G. Yes, the fuck coon is a slur, even if black people are using it. And yes, hotep is also a slur. Y'all take care now.